you check the children? Show a little match
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
You got Jaime and Fuego here.
And we are once again joined in what has basically become an annual tradition here on the channel where we get to spotlight this year's International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival, which is a part of the Phoenix Film Festival every single year out here in Arizona. And the curator of the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival is Monte. Been a friend of the channel for a long time and a friend of Fuego even longer. And so,
how far are we going back? Way back.
So yeah, we're here to talk about the horror movies that we are going to get access to be able to see before everyone else at the festival. Inevitably, there's at least a few films that we get to see early and talk about that everyone else catches on to way down the line. So I'm always excited about this. And Monte, welcome back to the show once again.
Hey, fellas, thank you for having me today. I greatly appreciate it. You know, you guys are the best, and super excited to be here today and talk a little bit about our festival this year.
Yeah, man, this is going to be the 8th one that we have covered with you. The first one was 2017, so, you know, time
That's
be
crazy.
Flying, man.
Jesus, 8th one, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the way this usually plays out, you guys, is I kind of turn the reins over to Fuego. He's done the deeper research on the films. He's going to ask Monte about them, and I get to be your representative. I get to be the person that's finding out about these movies for the very first time. So, hey, that's me. Let's get into it. Fuego, please.
Yeah, and it's kind of a fun dynamic because Cecil's going in blind. However, I read all the synopsis to these. I watched every trailer. I kind of did the deep dive into the IMDb's and, you know, whatever information I could get out of these. So it is kind of a, you know, interesting ping pong sort of session, Monte. And so you guys separate it into, you have horror features, and you have sci-fi features, and then you have showcase features. Is there anything, just briefly, because this is something I was wondering, how do you decide, is it based on prominence of project, or as far as like where to put which one as far as distinction goes?
So typically the way it works is our competition films are oftentimes submitted to the film festival for the competition category. That means they're up for awards. That means they're up for their entire whole set of awards for their category. Where the showcase are typically films that have been distributed or have already found distribution or have a larger kind of festival run. You know, maybe they've been at a whole bunch of festivals already, and it's kind of their opportunity to shine at some of these smaller festivals that, you know, aren't as giant as some of the ones nationwide. So typically what it ends up working is we end up working with distributors across the United States, even globally, and that's how we get our films for our showcase.
Nice. Okay. So then competition films are the ones that are in the horror and sci-fi distinction, and then showcase are the ones that have seen some eyes previously. Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Well, being the horror show, we're going to start out with a few of the horror features. Now, there are 4...
Wait, did we want to touch on the shorts first?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Why don't we touch on the shorts first? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. We'll just do a
okay.
chop. Yeah. So take a little pause here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's some distinction that I was curious about. And you know, the other thing before we get into the features is we have to make mention of the fact that we have seen some amazing shorts in both the science fiction and the horror category. So they do both an A and a B. We're not going to go into every single one of those shorts, but I mean, we have seen so many gems. What was it? Was it 18 matches? I believe is one
20
that we,
matches. I think,
20 matches. Yeah, that we still continually go back to. There's been some gems. And are there any you just want to throw out a mention of from either category, sci-fi or horror?
You know, I have wonderful programmers, Brandon Kitchen and Michael Stackpole. These two guys, they do a wonderful job. Danny Marinino is our horror shorts programmer, and Michael Stackpole is our sci-fi shorts programmer. These guys do the giant work of like kind of scouring through all of these submissions and finding a good balance that will fit our shorts features. And you know, working through so many films, I think every year it ends up being over, 80 to 90 films that ended up being submitted. So there's quite a competition on both sides. My favorite thing about the shorts is the fact that every single year, it always feels like one of those filmmakers goes on to do something big, or they start working on their next feature. And I'm always surprised because sometimes, because we have so many shorts that show up in the festival, every now and then there's a film that will come through as a feature competition or even sometimes as a feature showcase. And the filmmaker will come up to me and I'm like, hey man, I recognize you from somewhere. I said, I don't know where. And he goes, oh, we played the festival like 8 years ago. And I was like, whoa. I said, and he'll tell me his short. And oftentimes, it's a blur of like, oh yeah, I kind of remember a little bit of that, but it's pretty amazing to see these guys, continue to expand. And a lot of times it's wonderful because we have a mix of a variety of like Arizona flavor. We have a lot of submissions from Arizona filmmakers. And then we get this kind of giant spectrum of folks who are submitting all over the United States. We have international short film category or short film submissions as well too. And it's just overwhelming, to choose one would be very difficult. And, because it's our competition, I don't want to give any favoritism towards one film or the other. But it is wonderful to sit and kind of watch these. Sometimes we oftentimes every year we'll have horror shorts A and then a horror shorts B program. And I always tell people A and B are oftentimes completely equal in terms of like how we space them out. It's really just kind of built to make the best program that we can make. So it's a lot of fun. And Danny Marinino and Michael Stackwell, they do the wonderful work of putting these short film categories together.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's kind of like, almost putting a sequencing of a record or something together where you want to see how the flow and, peaks and valleys of everything, with each of the, side A and side B, so to speak. So, hell yeah, man. Well, props to Michael and Danny for getting in the trenches and, going through all of that. That's, they're doing the Lord's work, or in this case, maybe the otherwise, but whatever you want to put it. Okay, so now segueing into the features. And so, as we said, horror features, sci-fi features showcase. So we're going to start with horror, being the horror show here. And I'm going to begin with the one that has one of the most unique concepts, I think, as far as approaching acquisition of pieces of people and, subtext about vanity and beauty and things of that nature. This is a film called Cheryl, and based on the trailer, man, it looked very much like some of the grittier crime with horror things that I've seen recently. I mean, anything like Tarantino, Cohen, things of that nature, but definitely, injecting some more horror into the aesthetic and storytelling. What can you tell us about this one, man?
Filmmaker Justin Best is the director of this film, and it's awesome to see these films that are now kind of like utilizing a lot of different genres to kind of build their films up, right? You get these, and it oftentimes reminds me of like, how Tarantino built From Dusk Till Dawn, and you have this hard crime film that has a lot of horror pieces. And, I think back to the festival in the past, and I think, of other movies that are, just kind of full-on crime capers, and then all of a sudden turn into something kind of horror or horrific and gory. I think of a movie we had a few years ago called Blood Punch. Kind of felt that same way as well too, where it was almost felt like a whodunit and then turned into something different. And that's what this film is as well too. It's a really well acted film, and I think when we look at these movies, we're trying to figure out like where what are they doing great in their film, and this film is that kind of movie that understands genre, right? So it understands what it's trying to be, and then also the fact that it's going to go for those horror beats. It's going to understand those horror notes, and it does it with a wonderful cast. And I always laugh when you see these movies come through and they surprise you, because I didn't see the trailer for this movie and ended up playing it kind of cold one night, and man, it just kept me glued to the screen. I really, really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, because the trailer's a little vague, and that's the thing. Like, I don't even know if I want to tell him the full synopsis setup, because it's about this woman who has dated a certain type of person, and then after said breakup, she kind of starts piecing together what she thinks from other people truest beauty could be. So, I mean, without getting too spoilery into anything, I thought that was really cool. And, as far as the gritty crime with the horror and stuff, I'll Take Your Dead. We always have to shout out Chad and, and those guys, because we're friends with them, and, really enjoyed that particular film. So this is Cheryl. Most of these are playing 2 to 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. So you do have multiple opportunities, everybody, which is rad. So, this is one that's going to have both a crime and kind of a horror thriller sort of.
It sounds a little Frankenstein-y.
Yeah. And we've seen our fair share of those recently. But based on the premise, if I was to just describe to you what they have on the IMDb, it makes it seem a little more obvious from the trailer, which is relatively vague. But
it reminded me a little bit of May as well too, and some of these other, let's piece perfection together kind of thing. So it's really well done though. I love the story, and it kind of keeps you guessing.
Nice. Okay, man.
Cool.
So the second one is maybe what I'm thinking he might be the most into, and it was one of the few that I had a lot of familiarity with. And it's called Bakmono, if I'm pronouncing it properly. So I know this is from it's from this director who his previous film had almost kind of a samurai post-apocalyptic sort of vibe to it, and his big selling point is completely practical effects. You have this so Bakmono, it translates to what changing thing. It's like Japanese for monster, but it's a changing thing. And they were trying to get some additional funding for some more practical effects just recently. I remember reading on Bloody Disgusting about this. What can you tell us about this project, man?
This comes from director Doug Roos, and the premise for the film is basically, I always tell people I'm so cautious of Airbnbs these days. And
I've seen a lot of these movies.
And this ends up being like the worst Airbnb that you could ever stay in, because it's there's a creature. It's a creature feature at its core.
Damn,
and you end up having these wonderful filmmakers that stick with the tried and true honor of how we do horror film, which is, practical effects. I always feel like no matter what, practical effect will always make a oozing monster look a lot better than any kind of special effect. So the wonderful part about this, is it does understand kind of its entire premise. It knows that there's been films done like this before. It has this emphasis on kind of understanding like the genre that it's kind of that subgenre it's fitting into. And it does a great job of kind of turning that on its head and like really being something that turns up pretty gruesome and pretty gooey. And the creature effects are pretty awesome in this one.
Oh yeah, so that's up your alley, man.
Fuck yeah.
Well,
I'm
both
all
of ours,
about
to be
that
fair.
Hell yeah.
And so there is almost an anthological kind of approach to it, maybe? Or is that me just reading into things a little bit too much? Or
I don't want to give too much away.
Plead the fifth then. That's all right. That's all right.
I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah, because there's different people who come and stay at this Airbnb, and so different interactions with said creature.
Nice.
So okay, nice, man. So yeah, that is one that I've been hearing about for a while, as they were trying to get some finishing funds together for some more practical, which is fun. And the third, so we're not going to go through all four of these, unfortunately, but so the last addition to the horror features was one entitled, I'm just making sure I'm getting the title right, Handling the Undead. I had written down dead for like a derp for whatever reason, but so Handling the Undead was one of the last additions to the festival programming on the horror side that I noticed, and I was especially intrigued after the trailer because it most definitely is taking itself very seriously in the subject matter of a city in Norway, I believe it's Oslo, where suddenly people just start coming back from the dead. And we're talking about the recently deceased, the deceased a while back.
Oh, wow.
And the biggest intrigue for me, though, is the fact that it's based on a novel from the same writer as Let the Right One In, which I think is one of the best vampire stories. I've read the translation. I've heard about this book, but I just never got around to it, unfortunately, because it is a few years old at this point. And the source material was taking place in Stockholm, and so the Norwegian director just changed the location, to somewhere else in Scandinavia. But this looks gritty and just very dramatic, and so I'm super excited about this. It's one of my favorite and most anticipated, in the programming section.
Handling the Undead came to us very late. It was kind of our last film, but it is in our showcase section. It's not a competition film. So
okay, because I saw it listed in both in the scheduling, and I wasn't sure where it actually landed. So
if you saw me looking at my phone right now, I got a little panic because I was like, "Wait a second, that's not a competition film." I was quickly looking at it, but it's in our showcase section. So it does come from one of the big distributors out there, and the thing I loved about this movie is the fact that it understands tone, and you get this understanding of like, what would the end of the world look like, and what would that feel like, and how would people act in those moments, and while it takes this like tone, and it's really kind of almost a understanding of like loneliness and like this separation from self that we all felt, coming out of COVID and all these other things, and I often tell people that, it's interesting to see, like, you come out of this isolation because of this worldwide issue that's happening to everybody, and you realize, man, I lost like what 3 years of my life, 4 years of my life. It's just
a blur.
disappeared.
Yeah.
It's a blur. And you think about that in terms of like, what would that be like if something else came along, like, and you just had this understanding of like, wow, this is really the end now. This is really not gonna. This is the worst. So, in terms of tone, I like to tell people that that's kind of been my descriptor for this one. Is it's a wonderful handling of tone in terms of understanding grief, that loneliness. It asks some really, really interesting questions about how we interact with each other, and what it means to show humanity, and what it means to kind of be a good person, kind of thing. And I always love those kind of films when it's handled within the realms of a horror film, because to say that it's like, to say that it understands its dramatic pieces is like an understatement, because it's really diving deep into some of those real emotional pieces about people and how we respond to tragedy and how we respond to grief and all those things. So it's really well done film, and I was really excited when they told us that we could play it this year. It's played a lot of different festivals, and it's pretty interesting because it's gotten a lot of mixed reviews. So you get some people who've either said like, man, this movie's amazing, or some people who have said, oh, it's not really for me. But those are my favorite ones. I always tell people when I see that split decision, those are the ones I always want to go watch sooner rather than later, because I want to see for myself, what it feels like. And I end up being that guy. You guys know me. I'm always that guy who's like, man, I love feelings. I love feelings in horror films.
All the feelings.
So, well, I mean, that's part of why I liked I'll Take Your Dead so much. Mm-hmm. It had that emotional through line, and especially that gut punch at the end. And
another
like,
great one being A Dark Song is another one that really hit us in the feels hard, which was a previous festival feature that you guys did too. So
absolutely,
that's interesting. I every year there ends up being one that is like, that people will come back years later and be like, hey man, that movie still really stuck with me, or it hit me in a way that I wasn't ready for at the time. Like, I had somebody tell me, many years ago, there was this film we found, or this film we played. I forget what the name of it was, but it was it wasn't Greasy Strangler.
That one left an impression on me, man.
It wasn't Greasy Strangler. It was a vampire film. But I remember the overwhelming feel of it was like how lonely it feels to be, a creature of the night. That was
the one about. So I was at the point. The title's eluding me too. But was that about the black kid in New York?
In New York, yeah.
Excellent movie, dude. Wow. Yeah.
We'll have to find that out.
It's like a yellow cover, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. I was going to say, because the title is eluding me too. But damn, was that one good. This film, Handling the Undead, actually gave me some Maggie vibes a little bit. The Arnold movie with Abigail Breslin, who was great in that, and just the trying to grieve and yet also understand how to do something perhaps that is really just going to be gut wrenching, with regards to a loved one. So awesome. Okay, so not a competition feature, obviously. So it was double listed once again in the schedule. So that's my bad for not knowing where it was going to end up landing. But
it's okay. I appreciate you letting me know. I got to make sure those things are correct.
Sweet. Okay, now as far as science fiction goes, there's a few that are going to be omitted, obviously, both on the showcase and on the actual feature competition side. But the one that really caught my eye, man, it's got some familiar faces in it, and it most definitely has a budget, from what I can tell. It's called Roswell Delirium, and so you will recognize, the faces of Dee Wallace, Anthony Michael Hall. So I'm not sure how much they're going to be in the movie. Perhaps often the selling point of some of these bigger names, but all of the stuff that didn't even feature them. The plight of this girl who is perhaps abducted and has like a residual sickness after that transpires, but the trailer has so much going on in it between it looks global, governmental, cover-ups perhaps. I appreciate the fact that it showed there's so many different moving parts, but I was honestly a little overwhelmed by all of the things that I think is going on in this, but that's what leaves me so intrigued about this because it looks like it's on a pretty large scale, the storytelling here.
Yeah, Roswell Delirium is that movie that when I remember looking through it, I kept saying to myself, how many more actors are going to be, how many more surprising actors are going to be here? Because it feels like they just keep showing up. And I was so shocked when I saw Anthony Michael Hall in it. Because a lot of times when we get these, they don't show like full-on cast lists, or we don't get like a full breakdown. It just ends up being a screener that comes in. So when I was going through it, I was like, hey, that's Dee Wallace. And I'm like, hey, look at all these people that are in this movie. It's pretty amazing. The film, global is a great way to say it. It definitely is a movie that's stretching its budget as far as it can. And that's always really great in a sci-fi film, because, you know, you are trying to get this idea of like what would happen in this scenario. Like, it isn't just isolated to a couple of people. It's like this entire group of people that end up being aware and trying to take advantage of the situation and try to get their hands on it and change the narrative and all these different pieces. And I think I love most about this movie the fact that it plays with that paranoia of it all, and kind of that overwhelming, like this overwhelming issue that someone's always watching and someone's always looking, and you can't really know who to trust. And you know, a film like Roswell Delirium kind of feels like that's probably the exact kind of film that it should be. But I was really surprised by that watching it, the fact that you get this idea of like this underlying sense of like paranoia, and like this piece of like this story that ends up feeling like, whoa, like you can't really trust anybody if this scenario happened, or like what would happen in this scenario. And that paranoia is overwhelming. And I love it because that kind of reminds me of 70s sci-fi films. You know, you got films that, you know, that played on this, like Soylent Green, I think of, and you got movies in that era, you know, the Body Snatchers. You got these films that are all about, you know, that understanding of paranoia and that interaction of like what happens, you know, what, like, who can you trust kind of thing. And I like that about this one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, distrust of these big institutions that have so much power over us and everything, whether government or otherwise. So yeah, man, this is one that I think you're kind of hit and miss with sci-fi at times. I know, but this one, if any, from, you know, the more sci-fi leaning programming, I think this one might be a little more to your liking as far as concept goes.
Cool.
So,
I can keep my eye out for it.
Yeah.
I always go through and watch the trailers after we do this. So
nice.
Get reinforced and stuff.
So then this one is a competition feature then, right?
This is a competition.
Okay.
Yep. It's directed by Richard Bakewell. And I just pulled the cast up here, and I just want to share who the cast is. Anthony Michael Hall, Dee Wallace, Reginald VelJohnson. Okay. I mean, there's so many names in here. And then a bunch of other players that you've seen in a lot of other movies as well, too, that come up. I was like, when I saw the dad from Family Matters show up, I was like,
that's right. Some Die Hard, man.
This is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's really slick, and it's really well made. It's a really well made film. There's definitely some talent behind the cameras on these. Beautiful shots, and just a wonderful composition of shots in this one.
Excellent.
Cinematography plays such a huge part in sci-fi films. It's crazy. So it's always good when it's done on point.
Now, so the second of the sci-fi features that I at least wanted to briefly mention, it's out of New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken. And it's called and it's called the Bostrom Scenario. And so this is one that, you know, as the trailer kind of was leading me one way, and then as I read a little bit about the synopsis, it was leading me in a different direction, you know, about how there's, you know, varying stories all kind of fitting together, one about like a film crew, and then another one about the brother sister dynamic, where she's trying to figure out. That's the one that the trailer seems to focus the most on, is the fact that this girl, you know, so her brother is dead in her head, and everybody's telling her that she never had a brother, and so it's kind of it's leaning into this whole possibility of mental illness aspect. But then there's other more psychedelic sort of bits to the trailer, and I don't know. I'd say it's another one, as I mentioned earlier, if I'm going to lean back on that phrase of many moving pieces. And what can you give some insight-wise about this one, then?
So this one is directed by Ricky Townsend. I was sold when I read the synopsis and it talked about supernatural photography. Nice. That piece really connected with me. And again, I try really hard to go into these competition films as blind as I can. I trust the programmers when they're building these categories out. And these guys have been doing it for so long. You know, Michael Stackpole is a vet. He's been doing this job now for over 15 years, I think, some crazy amount like that. But Stackpole always does a wonderful job of trying to find a good mix of films and really trying to identify these films that are doing something different. And that's kind of what this one is. It is a story about kind of understanding it's understanding that element of like what happens when somebody who's a big part of your life just goes missing, and you have this innate urge to like try to reconnect with them and try to figure it out, and everybody around them is trying to erase that memory of that person. And then you get into the sci-fi pieces of it, right? This supernatural photographer and kind of his connection to understanding science and how it connects to the afterlife. And great performance by the lead actress in this one. Does a wonderful job of kind of portraying those pieces. And you know, to explain so much about this one would give away some of the fun pieces of
That's
it.
what I figured.
But,
Yeah.
but definitely, it is one of those films that if you can try to go in blind with it, I believe they have a trailer. That gives you kind of a good premise to kind of get into it. But don't ask anybody about it. Go figure it out on your own, because it's well worth the treat. It's a really well made film. This director is like super talented, and what he's able to do with actors and kind of with this like kind of far out there story, you know, really grounds it with like humanity and grounds it in this idea of like who these characters are, and really servicing the story. And that's wonderful. You know, we talk about that a lot in filmmaking, you know, with these young filmmakers, is always go back to that story, you know, find what's important with your story. And that's what he does. And it's a great film to kind of discover.
Excellent.
I have a feeling that this will probably be one of those films in the festival that people will be like, hey man, wasn't my style, but I walked in there and I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. Every year it's fun to hear those ones, you know, get people. I think of, I think I've told the story many times on here, but One Cut of the Dead was one of those films that I just remember standing in the hallway begging people, do not leave yet. I know it's terrible. Please stay. and they stayed past that 25-minute mark. I was pushing people back into the theater. And now to this day, people still come up to me and tell me how that's still their favorite festival experience and how they love that film, and they probably wouldn't have stayed. That or Dave Made a Maze. I hear a lot of people talk about Dave Made a Maze a lot.
I rewatched that just about 2 months ago, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, a friend of ours just recently, from Sinister Cinema, he just recently watched that for the first time.
Oh, really?
And he was just like, wow, where has this film been?
Did he like it?
He loved it, dude. Yeah, he loved it. I still have yet, as far as One Cut goes, to see the French remake. I had kind of some misgivings about it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet either.
Yeah.
You know, they submitted a screener to our festival, I think last year or the year before. Yeah. And it was just too late. It came in, I think, right at our cut for submissions. And otherwise, I've seen it. I watched it, and it's so difficult to try to one up the one that, you know, surprised everybody. But it is done by a very, very famous filmmaker. And it's interesting because I feel like culture plays such a role in these films, and especially with one being, you know, kind of deep rooted within Asian culture, and then this other one which is composed of a different culture. Those pieces just oftentimes don't reflect very well in terms of what people will tolerate and how much people will let go on a film set. So
and yet, interestingly enough, I have seen some people who have only seen the French version say they loved it, and I was just like, oh, we'll go back and see where it came from. So
that's funny. I know tangent here, but I still hear people who tell me that, you know, they've only seen this new version of what's the Elijah Dushku film with the Wrong Turn, where people will say, oh, like I watched this film Wrong Turn and I loved it, and I'm like, oh, I like that movie too. And then they tell me about the newer one. It's this it's this newest one that came out. Or I think about like what was the other one? There's been so many. The French Extreme film from a few years ago. They got that terrible remake. And still people who've only seen that version of it. And I'm like, why haven't you gone back and watched the other one? It's like I keep waiting for it, but but I love it. That's, I think that's kind of where, you know, it's interesting to see how much has changed in terms of like people's viewing habits. So much, man. There's too much. I can't keep up. And I used to be that guy that used to pride myself on being able to say, oh yeah, I've kept up with everything. Nowadays, there's no way. There's no way I can keep up with everything.
Yeah, I gave up on that a while ago.
Yeah, myself. It is daunting. I still keep track of everything releasing, whether it's VOD, streaming service, theatrical, whatever. But there's no chance, you know. Especially with being back in, you know, film studies and everything, it's insurmountable is what I would classify it as.
Oh yeah.
And so now we're gonna jump into the features that I thought that this gentleman beside me, my cohort in crime, would be the most intrigued by. And so these are the more prominent ones that, as you mentioned, have been on the festival circuit. They've been. Are there any debuts, like first time, debuts at the festival for anything, or is this?
We don't have any world premieres this year, unfortunately, but we
that's
do
the phrase I
have.
was looking for.
We do have a couple films that it's going to be their first time showing, or their first time in Arizona. And
nice.
One of the ones that we have is The Lonely Man with the Ghost Machine.
Yeah.
Lonely Man with the Ghost Machine is directed by our buddy with the film festival, Graham Skipper. It's an exceptional film. This actor, filmmaker, just gets better with every single thing he did, and I'm so proud of him for this movie. I was blown away, and I just really love that it's a personal piece. It's very heartfelt. You can feel a lot of personal kind of release of like these emotions in this story. It's that story about kind of a lonely man dealing with some pretty tragic things in his life. And Graham Skipper, again, was with the festival a few years ago for a movie called Sequence Break that he did. He's been with us. Yeah, he's been with us for other films as an actor. And it's really great to see him like really kind of grasp onto this directing, because he's really turning out to be a pretty phenomenal actor. I'm sorry, a pretty phenomenal director. And and this film is one of those. I mean, it just premiered, I think, yesterday or a couple days ago out in Seattle. And I think it's at one more festival before that. And then we get it here in Arizona. So it is playing kind of exclusively on our second weekend. So make those plans and mark those second weekenders things, and that's usually I always give the warning when we don't separate. I try really hard to separate it by a few days where we either get one on one weekend and one the second weekend, but this is one of those ones that will be a sole kind of second weekend breakdown.
Okay,
You gotta
interesting.
get those tickets early.
Yeah. This is one that had an interesting tone about it, that from the trailer at least that I watched, I was trying to kind of pinpoint if there was it had some dramedy sort of vibes to it, because it is about grieving, and also some psychedelic elements about it too, especially with some of the shots and some of the lighting and everything, and I was getting some of the well, I don't want to compare it to that television series where what's his name is the Last Man on Earth or whatever, but some comedic elements, some dramatic elements, and I mean, doing something very personal. Obviously, I think there was just him. There's the woman who I'm not going to give away anything about based on synopsis, and I think there's one other person that I read plays kind of a prominent role, and
that's it. Real small crew, only a few people, and. Skipper is the kind of guy who really loves those emotional pieces, and he also loves a little bit of silliness as well too. So it doesn't surprise me, that there's a lot of comedy in this one. Not a lot of comedy, but there's definitely some lighthearted moments as well too. But that I think that's important. You can't have sometimes these movies that level these really serious subject matters and this heavy tone on you the entire time. That's a lot. That's a lot to really take in. Yeah. So given these moments of levity, it does a great job, and I think that's that's also the skill of somebody. I mean, this is Graham Skipper's kind of like he's involved with all of it: acting, writing, directing, the whole thing. And for anybody that saw Sequence Break a few years ago, that idea of like using those psychedelic elements, kind of those mind trip pieces, it's all here as well too. So it's a really, really wonderful film. And again, like. You see these filmmakers come through over and over and over again here at the festival, and it's hard making a movie. It's hard doing a film. Yeah. And I always
this guy knows.
I know.
I
know. And his movie turned out amazing. Okay, I still remember that night. I had a great time at your movie premiere. I remember telling somebody it was a really busy week, and I told him, I said, I'm going to get back from a trip that morning. I said, I got to get out to Cecil's film, man. I got to see it. So. I was like dog tired, but I had a shot of energy drink right before I went in there, and it was very proud of you, Cecil. Very proud of you for that. It's wonderful.
I appreciate it.
Wonderful job. And same with Graham as well here too. Like to see these filmmakers who consistently come to the festival. You end up, wanting to root for them a lot. And like I said, no one goes out to make a bad movie. That's just not how it goes. So the variables and all these things come into play when you're working with a large group of people that make it difficult, and sometimes it doesn't turn out so great. And the fact that Graham is able to kind of continue to grow and get better, and it's just really great to kind of have that back and to see him, and I'd give him all the kudos because he's done a wonderful job.
Heck yeah. Well, if we're going to lean into the levity aspect, the one that we're going to jump into has more of a horror thriller sort of vibe, as in Next. And so I've always liked Nick Stahl, man. I'm even an apologist for Terminator 3. But he's starring in a film called What You Wish For. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to botch the title. So this is from the same director as The Perfect Host, where you saw Niles from Frasier just leaning into being just fiendish and having so much fun. Okay. And I've always been a big fan of that subgenre of horror thriller, stuff like The Invitation, The Menu, like the dark dinner party, sort of situation. And so, without spoiling too much, Nick Stahl is like a professional chef who reconnects with a buddy. Okay. They're going to go on this very high-profile job. Some stuff happens, he becomes a stand-in, and it's a not what it seems sort of bit. Monte, is there anything more we can really elaborate on without spoiling too much?
I always tell people there's a reason if I'm putting a film first in a program. This is our opening night film for Sci-Fi, and you're always looking for a film that's a crowd pleaser, and that's really a great way to talk about this one. It's a crowd pleaser. Nick Stahl's amazing, and I'm the same way. I love him as an actor. I loved him in Sin City. I really enjoyed him in Terminator film. You just talked about it. I am a fan of that one as well too. And I think that to see this wonderful actor get an opportunity to do something a kind of a pretty beefy role again is pretty great. And you hit the nail on the head when you talk about movies of influence like The Menu, and looking at the director's last film, Perfect Host. These culinary chillers are pretty great, and it is a little bit of that as well too. There's some wonderful moments in this film that are definitely crowd pleasing moments. I watched it at a festival. I saw a friend of mine who has he works at a different festival was sending me reactions after it was over, and the smiles on people's faces, man, when they walked out, and the cheers from people when they were walking out. It's pretty great, and I love that. And when I remember when I watched it here at home, it was probably, I don't know, you only have a short time to watch these movies, and sometimes I don't get to turn them on until 1 a.m. I remember when it was over, I was so exhilarated. I was like, this is great. I love it. Like, I wasn't sure what was going to be the opening night film for the festival. And, when I was looking through the list, I was like, this got to be it. Like, it's a crowd pleaser. It's a lot of fun. So it's a really, really good film.
Oh yeah, that's exciting.
High praise, man.
Yeah, for sure.
That's very exciting stuff then. Yeah, just based on trailer and synopsis alone, I like the whole attempt at redemption story, but maybe not going about it in the most savory of fashion.
Oh yeah.
So, and continuing with the theme of levity, and that we're not bouncing back up to happiness though. This one seems like potentially even darker, and this is a film called Property. It's out of Brazil. And it is another one with some massive social commentary about class, about wealth, about just, aspect of, just crime and violence that's going down. So as the trailer informed me about this, apparently Brazil is the country in the world that has the most armored vehicles, just based on, crime and, potentially, people being tried to, carjacked, robbed, whatever. Now, this is one about a farm owner, right, and his family, and there's gonna shut things down, and there is a revolt and an uprising of all of the workers on the property, and the woman gets trapped in her vehicle. Probably don't really want to say too much beyond that, but this looks dark, man. I mean, pitch black, practically.
You talk about social commentary and how in other parts of the world it's not so safe sometimes to go out and even just do daily things that we take for granted here in America, but the piece of this film that I think is so strikingly unique is this aspect of this armored car, while that may be the big vehicle, big premise in the film that this movie is going to be taking pretty much most of its story out of is inside this armored car. It is much more a reflection of history and kind of, these combative pieces of class systems and understanding, the difference between like how much the wealthy have and how like extremely poverty stricken the poor are in different parts of the world.
The gap
And
is huge.
Jesus.
yeah,
It's
the gap
terrible.
is huge. And you get this film that it's not hard to take away the fact that this armored vehicle maybe even at times looks like a military tank. And understanding, when those military tanks are rolling through different parts of the world to take seizure of those countries and come along with death and rage and all these other things. That's all reflected in this film. And I love that there are some films that we get that come into the festival that maybe don't feel so much like straight up horror or straight up sci-fi, but handle horror in a completely different way, that realistic horror. And I always feel like there's always room for those in film festivals. And a lot of times people don't know where to stick them. They'll say like, well, like it's too hard for, our regular festival, or it's too bloody for a regular festival. Where should we put it at? And they end up existing in these genre film festivals. And I'm so happy for that, because I'll take a film like this every day of the week, because it really does explore like where a lot of these ideas of like horror come from, and not to get too serious with it all, but like the world is a terribly horrific place sometimes.
Oh yeah, a lot scarier than monsters and some of the supernatural, otherworldly things that we all too often see. Yeah, some of the most horrific things, and that this one has some prime coverage too. I mean, THR, like some of the big outlets have covered this one, so yeah, it's definitely one to keep on everybody's radar. It's called Propiedad, property, that translate properly, yes. But property, definitely one that I'm extremely excited about, despite the the extreme seriousness of the subject matter. Okay, so the next one, it's called Sleep, and
nice.
So I'm trying to remember. It's a Korean film, a South Korean film, correct?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
I recognize the actress right away from Parasite, and the premise of this is relatively simple. Newlyweds. She ends up getting pregnant. Marriage seems to be going great, and then all of a sudden he starts waking up and just almost like having these sleepwalking kind of terror-filled sort of, what is it that he's saying to her over and over? There's something inside or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the worst thing that you want your significant other to say when you're pregnant with your child.
Oh my God! Great.
There's something. There's been wonderful films that have looked at child in peril, right? In peril. And nothing is more terrifying than a child in peril when it's still in mom's belly.
Yeah.
And there's something about, those films that really like are vastly like they're so like sensitive, right? Because that terror, you don't want terror to come to them at all. You don't want anything bad to happen to them at all. And I'm a dad. I got these little ones here as well too, and it's terror. Once you have a kid, the world changes in terms of what is horrific. And I love the fact that this year at our festival too, like we're really like leaning into our international part of international horror and sci-fi. We have a lot of international showcases this year, and Sleep is this one film that kind of came our way by accident. It was we work with a lot of distributors, and this distributor came in and said, "Hey, this film is like coming out a little bit later in our window." He goes, "You want to check it out?" I said, "Sure, let me take a look." Took a look, and I was like enthralled with the whole thing. Really well acted. There's something really sinister about some of these in terms of culture. The homes in some different cultures are wildly different than what we have here in the U.S. And when you put terror in those areas and these traditional bump in the night kind of things, and a spouse who is unhinged, in terms of their sleeping disorder that they have. You don't understand if it's something sinister or if it's just a disorder or what it is. And I love that about this movie, and it's a wonderful surprise, because it's one of those movies that I thought I kind of knew where it was going, and then it takes a turn, and I'm like, oh man, this is my cup of tea. I love it.
Love when that happens. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and there's been so much terrific horror coming out of South Korea for decades at this particular point. I mean, this one Exhumed that just came out, I'm very excited to go check out. So.
Yeah, we did a reaction of that earlier today, so
nice.
Definitely looks interesting.
Nice. Heck yeah, man. Okay, so now we are, well, I think I've got still one more that's kind of leaning into the more serious variety. And this one did seem like it's straddling that line between horror and science fiction. It's called Creep Blocks. And so, Creep Blocks, yeah. So it's essentially trying to tap into what the thoughts of those who have already passed on, and it's a gentleman who has some ulterior motives for doing as such. At least from what I was reading from the synopsis, there's a specific person that he is looking to make communication with, but it seems a little more on the sci-fi adjacent side of things as opposed to like full-on horror. But there is some thrilling aspects to what could potentially go wrong with this technology. What's the 411 on this, man?
Every year we get into this this issue with the festival of like trying to find science fiction films or films that fall in the sci-fi category, more specifically. And this year's that festival, where like it almost feels like we have a lot of films that are straddling the line between horror and sci-fi, or kind of probably more horror than sci-fi. But this is one of those ones that really falls into that category. It's a really well-made movie, and I'm so excited that we're able to have it because their producer, and let me get their name real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Can we pause for just a second?
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, let me go back. I want to make sure I get it right because this this producer has 3 films in the film festival.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 films, and we're doing it as like a back-to-back, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that he has these movies. But he's the son of a very famous actor. Let me just make sure. I always forget his name, though. I keep wanting to say his dad's name.
Well, we know by the last name, like right away, who it potentially is.
Stephen Lang.
Oh, no shit.
Noah
Wow.
Lang's son. Yeah, it's Noah Lang's son. Okay, let me go back. Okay, I'll start.
Okay, yeah.
So one of my favorite things about this movie is the fact that it feels so much like it's very much a sci-fi film, but it also has those touches of horror that are in it. And it's so awesome that we get to show this film because it comes from a producer. His name is Noah Lang. He is his family member is Stephen Lang, a famous actor. He's been in a lot of genre films as well too. And but Noah Lang is a exceptional producer, and he has 3 films in the festival, in Phoenix Film Festival and Horror Sci-Fi. And we're able to kind of have this back to back with him. So he has a film on Thursday, he has a film on Friday, and he has a film on Saturday. This is the second weekend. So It's pretty awesome that we're able to get him. And the fact that I think he is planning on being at the film festival. I love it when we get filmmakers and producers who can come to the festival. But he's here. And again, it's one of those films that, it uses this sci-fi piece and how do you communicate with a loved one. And we have a film earlier that we talked a little bit that kind of falls into that same category, but both of them do it vastly differently, and the tones for both of these films are wildly different as well too. Where one kind of falls into a little bit more with that element of grief, this one is a lot more speculative, like an understanding, like kind of what would happen if you were able to do that, and kind of what would that feel like, and maybe there's some dangers there, maybe like there's pieces of that scenario that aren't going to turn out so great, and but it is done by a group of really, really well-accomplished filmmakers. I love when narratives keep you guessing, and that's kind of one of those things again with this one that you just have to go along for the ride, and it's a really, really well-made film. And again, like the filmmaker is going to be there, or the filmmaker and the film team I think might be there, so it's going to be awesome to have them around to answer those questions. And anytime that we get anybody from the film who's going to be in attendance, I always tell people make those a highlight, because that's when you get to ask those ones who have been involved in the filmmaking process exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I still remember From Black last year, which was one of our favorites. Anna Camp did that great Q&A, with the director, and we ended up speaking with those guys further after the festival. So awesome. I mean, just making those connections when you see them in person, and can give them some additional promotion and love for the projects they're putting so much of their effort and ambition and stuff into.
Yeah, the Q&As following the screenings at the IHSFF are always awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so now, as far as levity goes, we finally get to something that is a little more on the jovial side. It's a French-Canadian film. The translation pretty much gives you the vibe of what we're probably going to be seeing here. humanist vampire seeking consenting suicidal person.
Okay. All right.
So it's got some of the whimsy that you've seen in things like What We Do in the Shadows. You know, almost mixed that with Let the Right One In kind of vibe was what I was getting a little bit. But the trailer is funny. It's about this girl who, she's from a vampire family. She decides, you know, she doesn't want to kill people, and so her family cuts off her blood supply, right? And so now she has to, you know, kind of find a consenting human and all this different stuff. And it's this depressed kid, and I mean, this looks like a ton of fun, man. What can you tell us about it?
Teenage angst, man. Teenage angst and a vampire film. It's a recipe for wonderful things. I love this film. It was one of the first ones that I ended up getting a screener for. And oftentimes I don't immediately say, like, we need to book this film. I'll wait for them to kind of get in and then kind of get a figure of what we have, because we oftentimes have more than what we can actually program for. But this was, like, I think the first screener I got, and it was my very, very first quick, like, yes, we got to do this. I think I booked it back in December, well before the film festival. I never do that, because a lot of times what ends up happening is these movies will find distributors and they'll end up coming out. And now we're like, well, now what do we do with that slot? Because they're with Shudder, or they're with, you know, Neon, or they're with a different company now. But I was so excited that this movie is coming. They're strategizing for it later in the year. But it is exactly everything you could want from that title. It's a lot of comedy. There's some really dark comedy moments in this one, which is really pretty great. The lead actress is phenomenal. She's so good, so committed to the role. And it just is it's at its core, it ends up being a relationship story. You know, this story of two young people kind of going through life and figuring things out in a complicated world. And we've seen that story a million times, right?
Always good in the horror genre.
Yeah. But sometimes good stories like that, you know, they can continue to travel pretty far. And that's definitely the case with this one. It's a lot of fun. It is there's a lot to really admire about what's happening in this one, in terms of the story, in terms of, you know, the cast and crew as well too. They've done a wonderful job with this one. And, you know, I tell people, I've been telling folks who've been asking me about it, I said, it speaks volume when it's the first film that I get way a long time ago, and I'm like, we got to do it. I really hope it's here. Really hope we can keep it. So it worked out. So we're lucky to get it. I honestly think we might be the last stop on this film before it gets its major release. So
it looks very much of that caliber, man. I mean, you know, like top to bottom.
Yeah, it's super, really well done. And I think it's one of those films for, like, you know, college kids are going to really latch onto this. You know, those maybe later high school age horror fans are going to really love it as well too. It does swing for the fence in some of its moments of terror, in some of its moments of horror. So it's wonderful, and I love movies like that. So.
Awesome. Yeah, this is one that I'm positive. I think I'm checking it out the first weekend. I believe it's playing that Saturday evening. I think it's the 10, something like that. So, but there are a couple screenings of this, just like with most of these films. And so, well, drum roll. So there are a total of 18 films, but we only ended up discussing 12 of them. And this is, along with handling the Undead, this was another last-minute addition. And it is a film that also... It seems more on the science fiction side of things. It is a flick called Things Will Be Different. And I was especially intrigued by this because this is the longtime editor of Benson and Moorhead. Is it his directorial debut? I think it is, yeah. So he's been editing with them since, I want to say, spring. And so he's been doing everything from there on out with them. The Endless, cool. Something in the Dirt. I mean, he's been kind of a mainstay of theirs, you know, collaboratively. And I think they're on as executive producers, right, Benson and Moorhead? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so... Yeah, it's got some time travel aspects to it, right?
Yep. It's director Michael Felker is his name.
There you go.
He does a wonderful job here. It's sci-fi film again. We're so lucky to get these sci-fi films because some of them have been really phenomenal, and everything in our showcase, you know, and in our competition have been really great this year. Really excited for the sci-fi. I love time travel films, so there's and the fact that you can play with it in so many different ways is so well done. And this is one of those small, contained, you know, few characters in this film, but it's really, really well done. And it uses very simplistic elements to display time travel. There's no giant beams from the heaven. There's no giant machines. Things just happen within camera, and it's so well done. And it's amazing because as soon as I was researching this film up, I saw that he was an editor with them, and you can feel those pieces in this movie. You can feel those elements of like somebody thinking like an editor and thinking like how they're going to piece together the movie, and it's really well done. And it's it's really a story about time traveling, a person who has access to time travel, who ends up getting into a scenario where he has to make some difficult choices and ends up getting separated in his time from his time travel element that he has. So he ends up getting stuck in a place. To give you more than that would give away a lot of this film, but if you're a fan of sci-fi films, if you're a fan of these movies that are really kind of simple in terms of their technique and how they portray sci-fi, you're going to love this one. It's really, really well done, and I'm excited that we're able to have it because, again, it's one of those movies, those last-minute ones that roll through are often the ones that we're waiting on, that I've asked many, many times if we can show it. Please, please, please let me show it. And the reason why they come in so last minute is because they hold out until the very end to see kind of where they're going to go. What are they going to do next? Yeah. But I believe it played some pretty big festivals already, and it's, again, real exciting that we get to play it here. I believe the director, Michael Felker, will be here on Tuesday for the Tuesday screening. So mark your calendars for that one. He'll be here for the Tuesday screening. And I'm sure he's excited to, you know how it feels, Cecil, when you're a filmmaker and anybody who comes to your movie, you want to be there. So we're excited to have him here, and he's excited to be here as well too. So it's been pretty great. Yeah,
I've seen some reviews that I obviously didn't read, but just headlines from larger entertainment-centric and genre-centric outlets giving some pretty big praise to this one. And I watched one scene that showed how they're actually going about things, and I thought it was really clever, simple yet clever. How the dynamic actually works. I thought it was really cool, and just based on his resume alone, and gets the stamp of approval from Benson and Moorhead, because I've loved pretty much everything those guys have done. And I got some vibes of The Endless as far as like cyclical and things of that nature. So I'm really, really stoked for this one, and that is not to diminish any of the other ones. I wish that we had more time to discuss. Most notably Tiger Stripes is one that we'll have to talk off air because that one looked really rad. In any event, I guess that is going to kind of culminate the proceedings. And so the Phoenix Film Festival, along with the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival, it plays essentially from one weekend to the next. And so April 4th to the 14th. And I like the way you program it, in the fact that if you have your weekends free, you can go spend the entire Saturday, entire Sunday watching stuff. But if you got the day job, the 9 to 5, whatever, you can actually get out there for the 7 and the 9 p.m. Monday to Thursday, the little mid-section in between the festival. And then so there's the big bookending. And yet, if you're here in the Valley, or if you feel like traveling out to check it out, it's just going to be a nightly commitment to see all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
We try really hard to make that program and schedule very accessible to everybody. But it's awesome. We have such a great time, and it's my favorite time of year because I get to see old friends, and I get to come around and have an opportunity to talk movies with people. And I know you guys are so busy all throughout the year. I get to say hello to you guys at conventions here and there, or random outings at movies, but I always feel like at the film festival, I get, I'm going to get my time with the horror show guys. We're going to get some good talk in. So it's a wonderful time. You can get all your tickets at phoenixfilmfestival.com. All of your passes and everything will be available there. Also look at our events. We can't go, while we may want to see 8 films in a day, it might be impossible. So make sure that you look at our event schedule, because we have a lot of breaks on the weekends, where you can go to fun events. We have a film prom, we have silent auction, we have a kids day if you have kiddos. We have an anime film in our horror sci-fi showcase this year called The Concierge,
and it's
which
only
is
playing
really
one
a fun
night
one.
That I saw.
Only playing one night. We're only able to get it for one night. So, but it's a lot of fun, and I always tell people this is your time to discover those new gems, to discover that new favorite movie that you're looking for. And again, guys, thank you so much, and it's a wonderful time, and can't wait to see you all there.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. Until next time, once again, we've been joined by Monte from the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival portion of the Phoenix Film Festival. Make sure you come and check it out if you're anywhere near the Phoenix area.
Harkins Scottsdale 101.
Indeed.
That is the loco.
Indeed.
Yes.
So, again, until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
Gracias, I've been Jaime Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.